Shadow Pokemon can be really powerful in Pokemon Go, and in this video we will be going through 18 of the best Shadow Pokemon you can get right now. So in no particular order, starting with the new Shadow Conkeldurr. This Pokemon is currently the 5th best fighting type raid attacker in the game, and that is including Mega Pokemon, so definitely one to hunt whilst it is currently available. It is also ranked 80 in the Master League with Counter, Dynamic Punch and Legacy move Brutal Swing. But how do you get your hands on a Shadow Conkeldurr? It is currently available in the form of Shadow Timber or Shadow Girder, which can be encountered from the fighting type Team Go Rocket Grunt. And this type of grunt can be identified by the line, "This buff physique isn't just for show." There is also another great Shadow Pokemon that you can get from the same Team Rocket Grunt, and that is Shadow Machamp. This Pokemon isn't quite as strong as Shadow Conkeldurr as a fighting type raid attacker, where it is currently ranked the 9th best, but it does have more versatility when it comes to Go Battle League because it is viable in all of the main leagues. In the Great League it is ranked 44 with 0, 14, 11 IVs, it is ranked 54 in the Ultra League with 0, 15, 14 IVs, and it is ranked 98 in the Master League as well. Next we have Shadow Darmanitan, which is the 5th best overall fire type attacker and the 3rd best in terms of damage per second. It will also be even better in the future when it gets access to its Zen mode. Shadow Darmanitan is a good fire type raid attacker to build on a budget because it doesn't require any legacy moves to be at its best, which is in contrast to a lot of the other top fire type Pokemon that do often want legacy moves like Blast Burn, for example. And to get this Pokemon you will need to obtain and evolve a Shadow Darumaka, which is available from the fire type Rocket Grunt, which can be identified by the line, "Do you know how hot Pokemon Fire Breath can get?" Next up we have the very strong Go Battle League Pokemon Shadow Feraligatr. This Pokemon made its way into the Go Battle League meta when it got access to the fast attack Shadow Claw during the World of Wonders season, and since then it has been a very relevant Pokemon in the Great and the Ultra League. It is ranked 6 in the Great League with 0, 11, 13 IVs, and it is ranked 2 in the Ultra League with 1, 15, 14 IVs. And it is also an option for Master League as well, where it is ranked 63. It's worth noting though that it does want access to Hydro Cannon, which would require an elite charge TM to get outside of certain events. And its prowess in Go Battle League does often overshadow the fact that it is also the 10th best water type raid attacker with double legacy moves Water Gun and Hydro Cannon. With that said, how can you get Shadow Feraligatr in Pokemon Go? Well, you can get it as a possible encounter from the female water type grunt that is identified by the line, "These waters are treacherous," and it can be obtained from the male Winning is for Winners grunt as well. And whilst on the topic of water type grunts, there is another strong Pokemon that is available, and that is Shadow Gyarados. This Pokemon is the 13th best water type attacker, so not quite as strong as Shadow Feraligatr, but its best moveset doesn't contain any legacy moves, so it is more of a budget friendly option and more accessible for newer trainers, despite the amount of candy that it does require to evolve Shadow Magikarp. But also, Shadow Gyarados is relevant in Go Battle League. It is currently ranked 85 in the Ultra League with 0, 15, 14 IVs, and it is ranked 24 in the Master League, so a great budget option for the Master League compared to most of the higher ranking Master League Pokemon, which are legendary Pokemon and generally harder to obtain candy for. It is worth noting though that Shadow Gyarados does want legacy move Aqua Tail to be at its best in Go Battle League. And whilst it doesn't have much meta relevance in Go Battle League, Shadow Magnezone is the 8th best electric type raid attacker, so definitely a good option to go after if you don't have access to Pokemon like Shadow Raikou, Xurkitree and Zekrom, for example. And to get an encounter with Shadow Magnemite to evolve into Shadow Magnezone, you do need to challenge and defeat the electric type grunt that is identified by the line, "Get ready to be shocked." But it is worth noting, however, that this one can be difficult to hunt because it is one of 6 Pokemon that are available after beating the electric type grunt. And as a side note, Shadow Magnemite is one of the few grunt encounter Pokemon that can actually be shiny with a 1 in 256 shiny rate, so it is pretty rare. Next up is Shadow Mamoswine. This Pokemon is a great one to have a team of them because it is currently the 2nd best ice type raid attacker in the game, and it's second only to Kyurem with Glaciate, which of course doesn't have a fast ice type attack, so if you only take into account those Pokemon with a full ice type moveset, then Shadow Mamoswine is technically number 1. As well as being a very strong ice type attacker, it is also ranked 48 in the Master League and even higher as a non-shadow. And luckily Shadow Mamoswine doesn't require any legacy move for its best movesets for both raid attacking and for Go Battle League, so you can use your elite TMs elsewhere. To get Shadow Mamoswine, you have to battle and defeat the ice type grunt that reads the line, "You're going to be frozen in your tracks," and then you'll have the chance to get an encounter with Shadow Swinub. The next Pokemon is a great value Pokemon to have because it is strong in both of its typings, so generally it's well worth having and powering up, and especially on a budget. And this Pokemon is Shadow Excadrill. It performs well as both a ground and steel type raid attacker, where it is the 8th best ground type attacker with moveset Mud Slap and Scorching Sands, and it's the 4th best steel type attacker with Metal Claw and Iron Head. And luckily none of these moves require an elite TM to get. Shadow Excadrill can also be an option for the Master League, where it is ranked 88, and again its moveset doesn't require any legacy moves. Shadow Excadrill's pre-evolved form Shadow Drillbur is a possible encounter when you defeat the ground type grunt that is identified with the line "you'll be defeated into the ground." It is however one of 5 possible encounters from this grunt, so you will probably have to do quite a few to get the actual encounter with Shadow Drillbur. And similar to Shadow Excadrill being strong in both of its types, is Shadow Rhyperior, that is strong as both a ground and a rock type attacker. It is the 8th best rock type attacker, and it does have moveset Smackdown and legacy move Rock Wrecker. It is also the 10th best ground type attacker with Mud Slap and high horsepower. And again, similar to Shadow Excadrill, it is relevant in the Master League, where it is ranked 92 as a Shadow and 82 in its regular form. And to get Shadow Rhyperior, Shadow Rhyhorn is one of the 5 encounters alongside Shadow Drillbur from the ground type rocket grunt. Next we have perhaps a more niche Pokemon that is only relevant in one aspect of the game, but it could still be worth trying to get a hold of whilst it's available. And that Pokemon is Shadow Quagsire. It is currently ranked 7 in the Great League with 0, 15, 14 IVs, and it does want legacy move Aqua Tail to be at its best, and that will cost you an elite charge TM outside of very specific events. To get Shadow Quagsire, you do need to evolve Shadow Wooper that you can get from one of the 5 possible encounters from the ground type grunt. But with the fact that this ground type rocket grunt can potentially get you Shadow Drillbur, Rhyhorn or Wooper, this is actually one of the more worthwhile grunts to battle. We also do currently have access to Shadow Pidgey, and while Shadow Pidgeot isn't really much of a flying type raid attacker, you do always have the option of purifying it to get access to Mega Pidgeot, which does happen to be the 15th best flying type attacker. But it is worth noting that it does require legacy move Wing Attack to be at its best, and if you do have access to Mega Salamence or Mega Rayquaza, then there isn't a lot of point in building Mega Pidgeot. However, Pidgeot and Shadow Pidgeot do have more relevance when it comes to Go Battle League. In the Great League, Shadow Pidgeot is ranked 45 and 35 as a Shadow with 0, 14, 14 IVs. But more importantly is its relevance in Ultra League, where Shadow Pidgeot is ranked 11 and non-Shadow Pidgeot is ranked 8. And there is another reason to go after Shadow Pidgey and even regular Pidgey for that matter, and that is the fact that it does have a low candy requirement to evolve. Costing only 12 candy, you can get half of that from one Pinap Berry catch. So it is a good strategy to hold on to these Pokemon in your inventory and evolve a lot of them during a 2x evolution XP spotlight hour with a lucky egg active. But with all of that said, how do you get Shadow Pidgey? Well, it is one of 5 possible encounters from the flying type rocket grunt, which can be identified by the line "battle against my flying type Pokemon." And whilst on the topic of flying type rocket grunts, you can also get Shadow Gligar as a possible encounter from this grunt, and it is another strong Shadow Pokemon. Shadow Gligar is currently ranked 9 in the Great League with 0, 15, 12 IVs, and its evolution Shadow Gliscor is ranked 26 in the Ultra League with 0, 14, 15 IVs. And luckily, these Pokemon don't require any legacy moves, so good ones to build if you're looking to get into Go Battle League or add another option to your Go Battle League roster. It's also worth noting that Shadow Gligar is one of the rare Shadow Pokemon that can actually be shiny with a 1 in 256 chance from a Team Rocket grunt. Next up is possibly one of the best on the list, and that is Shadow Dragonite. To start with, it is the 9th best Dragon type attacker, but not only that, it is also relevant in all 3 of the main Go Battle Leagues to a varying degree. Firstly, it is ranked 79 in the Great League with 3, 15, 14 IVs, but actually the middle stage evolution Shadow Dragonair is ranked higher in the Great League at rank 37 with 1, 15, 15 IVs. Shadow Dragonite is ranked 40 in the Ultra League with 0, 13, 15 IVs, and where it shines the most is in the Master League, where it is ranked 9 as a Shadow and 4 as a non-Shadow. So there is an argument for purifying Dragonite for Master League if you don't have any non-Shadow Dragonite. Purifying can also be a good route to the Hundo, with it adding +2 IVs to each stat. And while Dratini and Shadow Dratini are quite rare Pokemon, Shadow Dragonite is still a very budget-friendly option for the Master League because most of the Pokemon that rank highly are legendary Pokemon, and also Dragonite doesn't require any legacy moves to be at its best, so another good reason to build it. But how do you get Shadow Dratini so you can get access to Shadow Dragonair and Shadow Dragonite? This is one of 3 possible encounters from the Dragon type grunt that can be identified by the line "Roar, how did that sound?" It is worth noting that Shadow Dratini can also be shiny from these grunts. Next we have Shadow Garchomp. This is another Pokemon similar to Shadow Excadrill and Shadow Rhyperior that it is strong in both of its typings. Firstly, it's the 8th best Dragon type attacker just above Shadow Dragonite, and it is the 5th best ground type attacker, although as a ground type attacker it does want legacy move earth power to be at its best. You do also have the option of purifying to get access to Mega Garchomp, which is the second best dragon type attacker and the third best ground type attacker. And whilst Mega Garchomp is better than Shadow Garchomp, you can only have one Mega on your team at a time, and also to get Mega Garchomp you do need to raid it to get Mega Energy in the first place to Mega Evolve, so this will give you an encounter with regular Garchomp, so it would probably be better to use that Garchomp to Mega Evolve instead of purifying a Shadow. Shadow Garchomp is also ranked 77 in the Master League, but it is better as a non-Shadow where it's ranked 41. And to get Shadow Garchomp you do have to evolve Shadow Gibble, that is also a possible encounter from the Dragon type Rocket Grunt. And the third possible encounter from the Dragon type Grunt is also worth going after, and that Pokemon is Shadow Bagon. Its evolution Shadow Salamence is the 5th best dragon type attacker with legacy move Outrage, and it's the 2nd best in terms of damage per second. Shadow Salamence is also ranked 84 in the Master League and 70 in its non-Shadow form. And like Shadow Dratini, Shadow Bagon can also be shiny. Next on the list we have Shadow Metagross, which used to be the best steel type attacker in the game until the addition of Duskmane Necrozma, but Shadow Metagross is much easier to obtain and well worth building as the 2nd best steel type attacker with Bullet Punch and legacy move Meteor Mash. It is also the 9th best psychic type attacker with Zen Headbutt and Psychic. Shadow Metagross is ranked 100 in the Master League and ranked 55 as a non-Shadow. And as Shadow Beldum is currently unavailable, to get Shadow Metagross you must catch Shadow Matang, which is a possible encounter from the steel type Grunt that has the line "You're no match for my Iron Will." And alongside Shadow Matang you can also get Shadow Skarmory from the steel type Grunt, and this Pokemon is worth going after for Go Battle League. Shadow Skarmory is ranked 29 in the Great League and ranked 4 as a non-Shadow with 0, 15, 14 IVs, and it is ranked 35 as a Shadow and 22 as a non-Shadow in the Ultra League. And lastly we do have Shadow Gardevoir. This Pokemon is the 7th best fairy type attacker and the 5th best in terms of damage per second, and again there is also the option of purifying it for Mega Gardevoir, which is the best fairy type attacker in the game. To get Shadow Gardevoir you can get encounters with either Shadow Routes or Shadow Curlier from the fairy type Rocket Grunt that has the line "Check out my cute Pokemon." Some of these Shadow Pokemon are rarer than others, and overall Pokemon Go does feature a lot of rare Pokemon. And if you want to know what are some of the rarest Pokemon you can get in the game, then I recommend checking out this video next.